You are now listening to the Insight Fantasy Sports Podcast.
Welcome all and welcome into the Insight NFL Podcast. Tuesday, the 9th of December. My God, the playoffs are here. I'm just too excited. Week 15, Mav. Playoffs are just here around the corner. This is the first waiver show that we have to lock down on those waiver picks. It's the most important time of the year. This is do or die. If you did not lock up that buy, you lose, you go home, and nothing good to say about it. How are you feeling as we close out week 14? We do have that final game of the Chargers in an overtime win against the Eagles to recap before we get into the waiver picks. But how are you feeling as we dive into the playoffs here?
Yeah, feeling pretty good, mate. In 9 leagues and made the playoffs in 8 of them. The 9th league, shout out to Brady's World, couldn't make it in there, so and a long way off. But anyway, we'll see you out in the on the spirit out there. But yeah, all in all, it's been a pretty good year so far for myself in traditional fantasy, and hoping to get a few W's, a few championships along the way. Nice little paydays to come through at Christmas time is always quite nice. But we'll see how we go. Anything can happen in playoffs, mate. Anything can happen. You have one injury mid game, and that screws your score, or an elite player going down with a 2 or a 3. You just never know what can happen. That's the beauty about the NFL and fantasy football. Really, anything can happen at any time.
It really can. That's kind of the main goal at the start of the year, of course, is to win the championships at the end. But you really just want to give yourself a chance to get into those playoffs, because anything can happen. You could be the 6th seed. You could take out the big boys any given week. It just all depends on what happens in that week in the NFL. And it's a crazy game. That's why we love it. That's why we're super invested into fantasy, because really anything that can happen will happen. If you did miss last night's week 14 review and recovery from a Supercoach lens, make sure to check that out. The link is in below. But let's jump straight into the final game of the week, Mav, with this rewind. A big game, this one in prime time between the Eagles and the Chargers. Both were 8-4 heading into it. Chargers getting the win in overtime, 22-19. It was really a running game in the defenses from both sides of the ball in this one. We look at the Eagles, Jalen Hurts. Hopefully you weren't relying on him in your playoff on your week 14 to get to the playoffs, because he let you down in a massive way. 4 interceptions, 240 yards, no touchdowns whatsoever. Only added 8 yards on the ground as well. So he would have completely nuked a lot of leagues this week. Saquon Barkley finally giving us a bit of a taste of what he can do down the stretch. 20 carries for 122 yards and a score. Didn't give you anything through the air, but AJ Brown did. 6 for 100. Dallas Goedert, 8 for 78. And Devonta Smith, 4 for 37. So, Mav, on the Eagles side of the ball, this is a big loss for them, opening the door up for your Cowboys to sneak in through the division playoff spot. How are you feeling? I'm sure you're pretty happy seeing the Eagles win, but how do you feel about the Eagles offense in this one against the Chargers?
Yeah, they've definitely kept the draw alive, or ajar, should I say, for the Cowboys. I think it's a game and a half difference, give or take, but I think the Eagles got a couple of easy games coming up. I think they've got the Vegas Raiders coming up in a couple of weeks, and then someone else that's right down there in a couple of weeks as well, 2 weeks after that. So they should make it, but they have capitulated before. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago they capitulated big time, and yeah. So hopefully it happens again. But no, look, they were pretty bad today, weren't they? I mean, Jalen Hurts had 5 turnovers, I think it was, or was it 4 interceptions and 1 fumble, I think it was, and that fumble came on the same play. He actually got intercepted too, which is incredible. But I don't think I've ever seen that before, getting picked and intercepted and fumbling on the same play. Like -4 points for fantasy, which is incredible. But yeah, he was bad. He was bad. Terrible reads, just really not going through the motions properly. And credit to the Chargers defense, they were incredible. But through the skill position players, if you, as you said, Saquon, Goddard, AJ Brown, if you had any of those players playing, you'd be happy with the results they carved out, considering the output that Hurts gave you. But yeah, all in all, it was just a grossly weird game. Even on the Chargers side of things was odd too. So despite the score being close and going to overtime, it was pretty gross viewing for the most part, I thought.
AJ Brown racking up some pretty consistent performances in back-to-back weeks. 25 points in week 12 against Dallas, 35 last week against Chicago, now 16. You still take that any given week. Is probably your wide receiver 2 in a lot of leagues. Really, Devonta Smith hurt you in that regard in the skill players for the Eagles. For the Chargers, you didn't get a lot of help in these guys, especially from that receiving core. Kamani Vidal was the lead receiver in this game. 1 for 60, one catch, big 60-yard run there. He's just so slow. Big Zach Bourne, the linebacker, chased him down, was able to cover ground very easily. But Keenan Allen was the next best in this receiving core. Besides that, 3 for 22. Trey Harris, 1 for 18. Ladd McConkey, 1 for 12. Now, this one was surprising to me. I think I probably didn't have much weight on how good that matchup is. Cooper DeJean really locked down Ladd McConkey throughout the slot, and he just couldn't do anything. I thought he might have had a bit more of a chance in this game. But, Mav, do you think this game for the pass catchers, anyhow, you really draw it down to Justin Herbert? He had hand surgery this week or earlier on this week. It was on his non-throwing hand, but even still, you could tell the game plan was to get the ball out of his hands quick, give it to the running backs, and just let him stay safe for the week ahead.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of any sort of Charger player coming to the game. There wasn't really a fantasy option that I liked. I know Hampton came back too, so I thought that was going to sort of hamper Vidal a little bit, and it sort of did, but Vidal was still okay. All in all, it was pretty gross on the Charger side, despite winning the game. McConkey was, I'll be honest with you, he was open a lot in that game. I just couldn't find him. The pass rush for the Eagles put enough pressure on to at least move Herbert around a little bit out of the pocket, and maybe he didn't see McConkey because he was sort of running for his life a little bit too. So I definitely think that injury hampered Herbert. I think he was a bit fragile. He's a bit worried about sort of any sort of contact in his hand, just in case it makes anything worse. But good on him. He gave it a shot. He toughed it out, got the win. So good for them. But McConkey definitely nuking your chances this week if that's what you relied on. So I don't think I'm too worried about McConkey moving forward. But then again, McConkey's been very up and down for the majority of the year anyway. So very hot and cold, and a lot of it's not of his fault too. So I think that is one to watch.
Perhaps now with Hampton back in the deck, they really have a 1-2 punch with Vidal and Hampton under center. They split the touches for a lot of this game. Vidal had the more routes and higher snap percentage share, but in terms of touches, it was pretty split throughout. Hampton's first game back, 13 for 56. He also gave you 2 for 11 and also a score through the air. So that helped your fantasy teams this week if you were brave enough to put him out there as a start. Herbert also gave you 66 yards rushing as well, which was a nice little floor there for him to add in. How do you feel about these guys moving forward, Mab? Do you think, an extra week removed from that surgery is going to help Herbert hopefully get these pass catchers more involved? Or do you think it's going to really be a heavy run scheme and just really focus on Hampton and Vidal in the weeks to come?
Yeah, I mean, Greg Roman loves running the ball, so that's sort of his mantra, that's his go-to. So I think it'd be a run-heavy offense. In terms of the touches between Hampton and Vidal is going to be the real worry. If you're an owner of either of those two, really, I think they're going to split it all the way through. I think Hampton's the better player, more polished player. I think he can break a game open. But it'd be pretty rough to bench Vidal after what he's done over the last sort of 8 weeks as well. So I've really enjoyed what Vidal's done, and I think he should have a role in this team moving forward. And today, even with Hampton back, he provided. So I think I'll split it. I think they should split it. And for fantasy, it's probably not ideal, but for a team perspective, I think it's a fantastic move and a good problem to have.
One to watch for the Chargers next week. They are taking on the Chiefs in Arrowhead, and pretty much if they beat the Chiefs next week, the Chiefs are just done out of the playoffs. Even this loss or this win today for the Chargers hampered their percent of getting in a little bit, but if they win next week in Kansas City, that'll just completely get those guys at the back door, which would be a phenomenal outcome for the Chargers here moving into the playoffs and the Super Bowl, hopefully. Waivers, Mav, that closes out week 14. We'll jump straight into our top targets kicking off with the running back position. If that doesn't get you ready for the playoffs, I don't know what will. Here we are with the running backs kicking off out of the gate. I think Blake Corum, you have to really mention him. He's 49% rostered in sleepers leagues, still out there, heavily available. If you are putting in your claims this afternoon, make sure to put one in Corum if you do have a spare spot. It's a true split with the Rams in that backfield, and I think for the remainder of the NFL regular season, it'll probably stay that way. Head coach Sean McVay came out last week and said he wanted to get Corum more involved and let Kyron have a bit more rest when it comes towards the actual playoffs. That's exactly what he said. They split the carries 12-13. Corum had more yards on the ground, 128 compared to Kyron's 84. He did have that long breakaway 48-yard touchdown, though, which definitely helped with that. 2 touchdowns to 1. Blake Corum over Kyron. Really just looks like a true split, and I don't think that'll change, Mav, moving forward. How do you see this playing out? I'm just pulling up the rest of the season or schedule for these guys. The Lions this week to kick off the fantasy playoffs, Seahawks, and then the Falcons.
I mean, Blake Corum at this point, I mean, would you say 41% rostered at the moment?
49, yeah, just under.
49%. He has to be rostered. And I understand that there's people out there that play in shallower leagues. You know, he might not be in the top, 80 to 100 players, give or take, but I think he is. I think he is for the remainder of the year, especially if they're backing off Corum a little bit and sort of leaning on Corum to take some work off and some pressure off Kyron coming into the postseason. So I really like Corum. I think he's, we looked at him last year, for example. We thought that there might be a problem for Kyron, and he really wasn't. But now he is. So I think he has to be rostered, especially if you're a Kyron owner. I think he 100% has to be rostered. It's one of those handcuffs that you have to have if you've got Kyron Williams. But then again, like who do you play? But that's a problem they have for your roster. It's what you want. So, but if you need running back depth, man, and I think Corum, you can almost just start him. He's borderline a startable player. He's a flexible player, I think, at the moment anyway. So, who they got next week?
So they got Detroit next week. So that's going to be a tough one for the Rams. But I mean, depending on how your running back situation is currently, even if you've got a couple of starters, well worth it just to hold those running backs down the stretch. Because if you're looking to make that playoff run, I remember last year there was a couple of big running backs that dropped out start of the playoffs. I think Kamara, off memory, was injured in week 14 heading into the playoffs, and a lot of teams desperately needed that help. So if you can just hold on to Corum, I would rather
have Corum over like a lot of wide receiver 2s around the league. If we even some number 1s, well, you can say that Darnell Mooney right now is the number 1, obviously for the injured Drake London, but I'd prefer Corum all day over Darnell Mooney, for example. And then there's would you rather him over Juwan Jennings and stuff like that? I absolutely would. So there's obviously a scenario where Corum has to be rostered and almost played. So yep, absolutely. If you have money left over or fab or waiver priority, whatever you've got, just chuck it all in on Corum and see you later.
It's a great investment to make this time of the year. How about Devin Singletary, Mav? I know we mentioned on him last week's waiver show. Those guys were heading into the bye. Looked like Tyrone Tracy Jr. had suffered a pretty extensive hip injury. I believe he was cut it off in that game. Supposedly it's only a hip contusion. Tyrone Tracy Jr. has come out saying that he's going to be good to go. Again, take it with a bit of a grain of salt. It's going to be hard to really trust what these players say, but Devin Singletary off the bye up against Washington. Washington are allowing the 29th most points to opposing running backs in fantasy this year. The matchup's good. They're probably going to be favored with Marcus Mariota to start for the Commanders with that Jane Daniels injury. So how do you feel about Devin? Do you think it's worth throwing a pickup for him, or are you a little bit worried about that Tyrone Tracy Jr. being thrown back into the mix?
It's actually funny. We were talking off air about Devin Singletary at a Supercoach lens, and I was just sort of, proposing some trades for tomorrow's show in our Supercoach show. But I do think Singletary should be rostered as well. I mean, is he the better back than Tyrone Tracy at the moment? It's definitely debatable, and I think you've got a reasonable argument to make that he's the better running back at that team at the moment. He's been putting pretty good numbers over the last 3 weeks. And, yeah, as you said, very juicy matchup this week too. So I think he's a goal line back. I think he's the first down back. I think there's a world where he sees 10-plus carries, especially without any receivers that the Giants have got. So they might just run the ball down the skull of Washington, and it might be a mixture of both Singletary and Tracy. But I expect Singletary to be heavily involved still.
And he doesn't have a bad rest of season behind that too for the Giants. Minnesota in week 16, we saw even Chris Rodriguez, who was pretty effective against those guys last week before the game got blown out of proportion thanks to the wet sock. Then the Vegas Raiders in week 17. So again, very juicy matchup. They'll probably be favored heading into that game. And that's positions that we love for running backs there. So another good option. Chris Rodriguez Jr., Mav, he's at 60%. Roster, we usually talk about those guys around that 50% mark, but I think it is worth mentioning Chris Rodriguez. He's touchdown dependent, no doubt. He doesn't really offer any pass catching upside. They do have the Giants this week in that same game. Again, it'll be close in terms of the line there. They've got the Eagles in week 16. It'll be a cold game, and the Eagles against the run have been very poor the last few weeks. And they've got Dallas in week 17. So a bit of a juicy matchup. But again, it's really, really touchdown or bust when it comes to Chris Rodriguez. So how do you feel about him moving forward?
Yeah, again, it comes down to if you are being needy or not. So I can understand why you'd want him if you are. If you want some depth or you're worried about any pieces that you've got. I mean, at this point in time, like I've got a league, for example, I've got both Genty and Brees Hall, for example. And look, they're much better talents than Rodriguez, don't get me wrong. And will be for years upon years upon years. But God, they're in really bad situations where they just can't get anything going. So Rodriguez, it's sad to say that he could be in that same category as those two players. That's just saying that those two other players are on the lesser end. But yeah, I think he has to be rostered and at least sit on your bench. He's probably the starting running back. There is a committee going on there, but he's probably the starting running back. The offense is pretty gross, I suppose, with Mariota playing center QB now with no Daniels. But yeah, if you are being needy, I think he has to be rostered, and you can sit there and see what he can do. But he's very touchdown dependent, as he said. So, and it feels like Genty and Brees Hall are the same anyway.
Yeah, it's a tough one for those two guys. But again, this point of the year, running backs is going to be so hard to come by. So definitely load up for that final stretch run home. So Matt, for you, just to recap, Corum, Singletary, and then Rodriguez in that kind of order, if you had to pick it.
Yeah, definitely.
Easy. Wide receivers, we'll move straight on to the next position here. And again, a lot of names from last week. One is emerging more as a more solid option with the injury to Rome Odunze ahead of him. Luther Burden, he's at 37%, the rookie for the Bears. Rome Odunze dealing with that stress fracture in his foot. He could be out for multiple weeks with that one. Sounds like it's been lingering, and we kind of only had word as he was ruled out to start this game in week 14. Wish we would have known beforehand. We could have made some early moves in, but Luther Burden does pose as a nice little option down the stretch run. Nice upside potential. He's a big playability. He led all the pass catches last week with 67 yards. They do have the Browns coming up this week, so that's going to be a tough one. But then they do have Green Bay and San Francisco. But at least for Luther Burden, all it takes is one play for him to really make you a week. How do you feel about him, Mav?
I'm not too big on Luther Burden, if I'm being honest with you. I don't know if without Rome Odunze anyway, I don't think that the Bears have a true number one receiver to take over for Odunze. We thought it might have been DJ Moore, obviously, but DJ Moore is he's pretty much dead to that franchise at the moment. He's not getting used at all, and it looks like he's almost given up on them too, which is sad to say because he's having a half decent year. So. But yeah, Cleveland, Green Bay, San Fran, the next 3 games, like that's not really too great. I mean, the San Fran matchups are all right, but the first 2 in Browns and the Packers are going to be very, very tough. So, look, despite Noah Odunze, he saw 6 targets. If that's his ceiling, then I'm worried. If that's his floor, then okay, cool, he has to be rostered. But he hasn't seen anything more than 6 targets over the course of the season, and the last 2 weeks being the season high for him. So unless they're building on, maybe 8 or 9 next week. I don't know. I doubt it. But I suppose if you want someone at a pinch and you're looking for a bit of a home run threat or a guy who could go big potentially, he's your guy. But realistically, mate, when I say he's gone big, he hasn't really shown at the NFL level just yet. Like, he hasn't really come up with any massive plays. He's had one big game in week 3 against the Cowboys. He had 3 for 101 in that game. Outside of that, I think that's his only touchdown on the year. So, when I say big playability, I really haven't seen it just yet. If I compare him to like a Rashid Shaheed, for example, he's got the big playability on less targets. I can't compare Luther Burden to Rashid Shaheed.
How about Darius Slayton? Mav, would you be a bit more inclined with him? He's 28% rostered, coming off the bye. Some very juicy matchups coming up with the Commanders this week, Minnesota and then Vegas Raiders to close it out. Green matchups all along the way in terms of a wide receiver position. We've seen what he can do with Jackson Dart as well. It's been a small sample size, but he does look to be that clear long play player in that wide receiver room. Would you rather him over Luther Burden at this point of the year? And also I've got to loop in, and I already know the question, Kayshon Boutte. I know you're a big Boutte man. 43% owned. He's got Buffalo, Baltimore, and the Jets coming off the bye on the same thing. So all 3 guys there with some really big upside potential. How do you kind of rank them with Luther Burden, Boutte, and Darius Slayton?
I've been big on Boutte for the whole year, so I have to go with Boutte number 1, Slayton 2, Burden number 3. Slayton's rest of season schedule is quite juicy. Washington, Minnesota, Vegas, Dallas. If you play week 18, he has the Dallas matchup. I doubt anyone does, but if you do, that's there. Dart does need a play to throw to. Wandale Robinson's been okay. That's as far as he's gone, just okay. We're talking about like home run threats. I think Slayton is a home run threat, to be honest with you. He's the guy that you look at, 50-yard touchdown or 30+ touchdown, yard touchdown out of him, and I think he can give you that. He gave that in week 13 against the Pats, so I think he had a 30 or 35-yard touchdown. But keep in mind, on very, very limited targets. He's had 7 this year, and he plays like 75% of snaps, 75% plus, should I say, of snaps, generally speaking. So to only see 3-4 targets a game on average in that sort of usage or time on ground percentage as such is pretty bad. So you're really looking for a home run threat, and that's what he is.
If you're an underdog in your matchups, you're definitely going to need players like that can just boom any given week. How about Jaden Reed, Mav, the last name that we have here in our wide receivers for this week? His first game back from injury. He's only played 47% of the snaps in this one. 4 catches for 31 yards. I have the Broncos, Chicago, and then Baltimore over the next 3 weeks. I know looking at it's going to be a tough matchup against Denver, but then it will look to open up down the final stretch. He's only at 48% rostered, tied to Jordan Love, who's been playing lights out the last couple of weeks. How do you feel about him as an option down the stretch?
Well, I mean, Christian Watson's really come off, hasn't he? He's got 2 touchdowns last week, only 4 catches, but 2 touchdowns to say the least. He was worked into that game against the Bears over the weekend. He had 7.3, I think it was, 4 for 31, only 47% snap percentage. So, again, I don't think they're going to rush him into it. He's not going to play like 100% of snaps next week or anything like that. So they're going to work him back into it. I think he's rosterable. Is he playable? It takes some big balls to play him if you had to. But look, I don't think Jaden Reed's going to win you a championship, if I'm being honest, at this point in the year. So, and I don't think he's playable at any point during the year as well. I know he's got Chicago and Baltimore in week 16 and 17, which isn't too bad, but it's just not something you'd want to be doing at this point of the year. He hasn't shown enough over the course of his career to trust on him, and obviously hasn't played enough snaps this year to really trust him if he's fit or if he's not fit. Like, we just don't know. So you'd be relying on a touchdown for sure out of him.
More so a stash at this point of the year. Again, coming off of injury, we really need to see some more games before we have any trust in old Jaden Reed. But perhaps tight ends, Mav, we might have a bit more trust in these guys. There is a few big names for waiver wire pickups for this week. Harold Fenton Jr., he is at 65%, so outside that 50, but he has to be mentioned. He is the number one receiver for the Browns. Take it as what you will. Not a sexy title by any means, but Shedeur Sanders threw the ball 42 times last week, and Fenton Jr. had 11 targets in that game as well. So he's a monster. He breaks tackles for fun. David Njoku also dealing with a knee injury. He left that game. He could miss extended period of time at the back end of the year. There's no real point rushing him in, so it could just be Fenton Jr. playing lights out. How about Ben Sinnott, Mav, a guy that is readily available in all of your leagues? He's at 2% rostered, and he is a name being highlighted purely because of that nasty Zach Ertz ACL injury that took place. You hate to see it, but again, this opens the door for Ben Sinnott to come through. He hasn't really done anything in his career so far. He's been playing behind Zach Ertz, very similar to Trey McBride in Arizona when Zach Ertz was there a couple of years ago. But how do you feel about him down the stretch? And he does have Marcus Mariota, we think, for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, I mean, look, I really liked Ben Sinnott coming out of college. I really liked him. Second round pick, I think he was top of my head. Receiving tight end, physical tight end, likes to put his shoulder in and bruise blokes along the way. Big physical guy, but I don't like the landing spot and I don't like the opportunity. The opportunity is fantastic for him, obviously, but I just don't like what he's got in front of him. He's playing against three teams that cover tight ends pretty well, and they're all divisional matchups for the remainder of the year. They got the Giants, Eagles, Cowboys, and they're generally okay against tight ends. So let's see how he goes. I don't think he's rosterable just yet. I think we're going to see him on the waivers still. If you're tight end needy, sure, you can stash him there and see how he goes, unless you've got him for the week after if you need to. But I think there is better options out there on tight end at the moment for than a bit of an unknown to this point. But for Dynasty, it's awesome. I mean, I've got him in a couple of Dynasty leagues and I'm happy to see what he can do for me. But in a redraft playoff scenario, I'm not into it. It'd be a stash at best.
Very tough to trust. But we do have three names, and I'll loop them all together because I think they kind of all are in the same boat. Darren Waller, he's at 42% owned. Isaiah Likely, 13% owned, and Mike Gesicki at 5%. Kicking off at Darren Waller, he wasn't really needed in that game against the Jets this week. It was a shutout. They won the game on the ground. Waller only played 37% of the snaps in his second game back from injury. It really does open up here, though, down the stretch run. Pittsburgh, they've been horrid against tight ends so far in the year. We saw what Isaiah Likely should have done. He should have had a touchdown in that game there against those guys. He's got Cincinnati in week 16, which is the best matchup potentially of all time over the whole history of the NFL against that tight end position. And then Tampa Bay in the finals run home. Again, another nice matchup there. Isaiah Likely against Pittsburgh. Oh, no, they played Pittsburgh this week. They've got Cincinnati this week. So, again, similar to Darren Waller, very good matchup there. New England Patriots, they've been leaky to that tight end position and locking down everything else. And then Green Bay, it's a little bit harder. And then Mike Gesicki with his run home. Baltimore, Miami, Arizona, all green pluses in the matchup division, and also could be without T. Higgins for a couple of weeks with him sustaining multiple concussions in back-to-back weeks. So how do you feel about these three, Mav? Is there one that sticks out to you like a sore thumb, one that you'd be ready to lock in with your matchups for this week and hopefully weeks to come during the playoffs?
I think you've ranked them already for me. I'd have Waller into Likely into Gesicki. I think Waller's probably the one you need to start him on a pinch. He's probably the guy. I mean, he had a pretty bad game this week, but it was his first game back or second game back, so he's still sort of getting into it. But as you said, green matchups coming up. So if you like anyone, I think he's the guy you need to start on a penny. Into Isaiah Likely. I mean, Mandrews is still in the house, but they still sort of use Likely here and there anyway. So again, if we're looking for upside or big playability, then Likely can give you that. But again, very low floor, and that low floor can be a donut too. So be very cautious on how you use Likely in your fantasy matchups or lineups, should I say? And then Gesicki is probably, as you said, if he's filling in for T. Higgins, then there should be plenty of targets to go around with Joe Burrow throwing the ball. So, he's probably got a higher floor, but a lower ceiling than what Buckley can give you. So, yeah, take that for what it's will. I think that's pretty much it for the tight ends. I mean, you got AJ Barner in there who still keeps churning out some sort of role. I don't know how and why, but he's still relevant at Seattle. But then again, outside of that, there's probably nothing else there. Tight end Mason Taylor, if Fields comes back, maybe if he's available. He's up and down for the most part. Mason Taylor, but I probably prefer Mason Taylor over AJ Barner if I'm honest. But yeah,
On the same there, and I've got it in the same order. Jaron Waller for the rest of the year. That those matchups are just way too juicy, and he's a big touchdown threat as well, which could definitely help you win the week in that position. Quarterbacks, Mab, there isn't a whole lot of guys here in terms of super flex. Marcus Mariota, of course, if Jane Daniels doesn't play, it's only because of he's only an option if he doesn't play. They do have the Giants as a great matchup, adds plenty on the ground, only 15% rostered. I'd be happy to plug and play him in week 15 if Daniels is out. Could give you 20 points, definitely going to help you get through. Shador Sanders, Mav, how do you feel about him? He's at 18%. Had a massive boom game last week, but you can't always be playing the Tennessee Titans. They do have the Chicago Bears in week 15. The Bears are currently ranked 25th in fantasy points allowed to the opposing quarterback. So a nice juicy spot there. But again, it is Shador and very hard to trust. So how do you feel about him heading into the first week of playoffs?
well, I think in a super coach lens, in a super flex lens, should I say, he has to be rostered. He had that big boom game. He's very inaccurate still, but boom game nonetheless. So I think he has to be rostered. And, does he get played? Not really. I don't think I'd have some big balls to play in the playoffs, but yeah, he's been fantastic. To be honest with you, he's exceeded my expectations. He's probably outplayed Dylan Gabriel. Been named the star for remainder of the year, so a few ticks there in his box. So yeah, see how he rolls. Another name I'm going to chuck out there, he hasn't played for 5 years, is Philip Rivers. They reckon that Riley Leonard might not get up for this week's game. Anthony Richardson, I don't know what is going on with him, but he's not available either. So they have to go down to the free agent pool, and there's no one there. So they're trying to call people out of retirement to see if they can come out for a few games. And it's almost like a local team going a bit short on players and doing the rounds and a few phone calls for ex-players and saying, can you come play for us for a few games? We desperately need you. And they've still got Philip Rivers' number somewhere deep in their contact list, and they've asked him if he can play off the pension. It seems like he's available and he's going to come into practice this week. I think early as tomorrow, and yeah, see how he performs. Hasn't played for 5 years.
That's unreal. 44-year-old Philip Rivers off the pension, like you just said. That's unreal scenes. But I mean, hey, they might need it. They definitely might need it. They've already traded away their two first round picks. They are all in on this year. We'll see how that plays out. In terms of one quarterback, Mav, we don't really have options, but we do have streamers for this week. Spot starts that have a nice matchup for week 15 that can hopefully get you out of trouble. Marcus Mariota, I'll throw him in here purely because of that matchup against the Giants and if Daniels is out. How do you feel about Tua against Pittsburgh? Mav, he's readily available in one quarterback leagues. Steelers are allowing the 27th most points, they're the 27th worst defense to opposing quarterbacks. That's definitely a better way to phrase it. It is in Pittsburgh, so it's going to be a bit colder. We know how Tua is when it's not in the heat in Miami. How do you feel about him as potentially a streamer for this week?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I think matchup's okay. I just don't like Tua in general. But he's a gunslinger. He's not really afraid to throw the ball. But yeah, he's obviously an option. Mate, I'll give you another one here as well, who's, I suppose, a bit of a lesser name under the old QBs as such at the moment, is Tyler Shuck. He's been pretty good over the last few weeks. He's averaging, he had one bad game in his last 4, but, if you take that game down, he's averaging 15, 16 points a game, give or take. So, yeah, I think they're playing Carolina this week, so tougher matchup. But he's got the rushing upside to his game. He's got Olave there, he's got Valet there, so he's been performing. It seems like they've got at least something there, at least some positivity to come out of that. So if you need a streamer, I think Tyler Shuck is not too bad. Some
good options there. Hopefully, you don't have to dive that deep into the barrel. one name that I will throw out that's definitely stands above all, but he is 65% rostered, but he's coming off the bye, so it could have been dropped. Brock Purdy up against Tennessee at home and their stretch run. Tennessee, Indy, and then Chicago to close out the playoffs. Love to pick him up. I'll be looking at a couple of 1 QB leagues after this and seeing if he is available with that one there. That will wrap up the waivers and streamers for the week. We do have a couple of little comments in here, Matt, that we'll just get into. One here from Sebastian. Go Bills. Sorry, Sebastian, we try and leave all comments until the end of the show when we get through to them. Johnny Gonzalez has thrown in here. I have Dart, Hurts, CMC, Trade, Gibbs, Devonta Smith, AD Mitchell, Mike Evans, Jaden Reed, Kittle, Aaron Jones, Seahawks defense, Texans kicker. Who should I start at wideout 2 for playoffs? Wideout 2 for playoffs, Mav. So Devonta, AD Mitchell, Mike Evans, Jaden Reed.
I think Mark Evans is planning on playing this week. He's practicing to play this week. So if he does, it's easy. Devonta Smith, Mark Evans, duo. If you don't, you might need to roll with AD Mitchell. It might be next best. Again, Jaden Reed's probably the other one, but I'd rather roll AD Mitchell for now. But yeah, definitely Devonta and Mark Evans if he's playing. Definitely.
Absolutely. Devonta's up against the Raiders this week. So a very nice, juicy matchup there. Last but not least, from 8 Crazy Nights. Hello, I'm wondering if you guys would start Harvey or Tyrone Tracy Jr. And I think it's pretty easy, Mav. We're going to go with RJ Harvey, just considering that split with Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary. RJ Harvey is up against Green Bay in Denver. It is a tougher matchup, but he's involved in that pass catching role as well, and also he's a breakaway runner. He could find the end zone on any given play. So lock in RJ Harvey. Should be pretty happy with the outcome between those two for the playoffs. That'll close things up for our waiver wire show, kicking into the playoffs for the first week. We will have tomorrow night's massive Supercoach Trade Talk show for week 15. Always a beast, and best of luck with your waivers. This is the time to nail those picks, because they could ride you to a championship to close things out. And hopefully you're like Mav, you're a very high percentage in the playoffs and can lock away a couple of titles for the year. Final thoughts from you, Mav, as we close this one out.
Yeah, mate, anything can happen in the playoffs. So it's the best time of the year for fantasy. I think week 17 goes into Christmas, so it could ruin your Christmas or it could make your Christmas. So that's the beauty about it. But best time of the year. I know there's some teams out there that haven't made it and they've probably tuned out and given up on the year. But if you're still around, still having a crack, and it's a great time. So get around it, and hopefully your boys get up for you and you can get into the week 17 final.
Put your waivers in, get every advantage that you can heading into it. Thanks for tuning in to the Insight NFL podcast. We'll be back here tomorrow night.
Cheers.